What's up, fellow bike nerds? Welcome back to the Weekly Rewind presented by 99 Spokes, where we catch you up on all the hottest cycling news from the previous week, which in this case just so happened to be Eurobike. Hopefully, you've already been following along with the dozens or maybe even hundreds of new bikes, components, and accessories that have been debuted at this year's show. But for this video, we're going to stick to the stuff that gets me the most stoked, which is prototype and newly released bikes. In the next 10 give or take minutes, I'm going to share 10 give or take of my favorites. But if you think I missed something, be sure to leave that in the comments so other folks can check it out. Up first, we have one of the crazier gravel bikes I've ever seen, from a brand that up until this past weekend show, I'd never heard of, and that's RS Development. This unnamed gravel bike features carbon tubes bonded to some beautifully sculpted titanium lugs. But what makes this bike especially interesting is what's hidden inside those tubes and lugs. First up are some cleanly integrated lights on both the one-piece carbon cockpit and in the rear dropouts. These are both charged via dynamo hubs, so no need to keep up on your battery charging. What's even more impressive though is the tuned mass damper, or TMD, in each fork leg. TMDs have been growing increasingly popular in high-level downhill racing for their ability to reduce vibration and improve stability. But as the name would imply, they inherently add a good deal of weight, which is one of the reasons why they've been slow to expand to other cycling disciplines. But according to RS, the implementation on this gravel bike costed just 250 grams. As far as I know, they're one of the first people to play around with mass dampers on a gravel bike, and it'll be interesting to see if other more major manufacturers take note and do the same. Sadly, however, the RS gravel bike isn't slated for production anytime soon. This is essentially just a proof of concept, but one that gets me pretty dang excited nonetheless. What's not a proof of concept, however, are the 4 new bikes that Polygon brought to the show. Each of these are expected to hit the market later this year. Up first is a 120mm flex day cross-country bike they're calling the Syncline DR. Then there's a full carbon trail bike with an updated IFS suspension design called the Colossus T. There's also a full-fat EMTB version of that same bike called the Colossus TE, and finally, a carbon front triangle variant of the current Colossus N. These new bikes seem to mark a pretty big change to Polygon's take on their position in the market. Other big direct-to-consumer brands, namely Canyon and YT, have done a great job offering both premium top-tier bikes without losing sight of the value-conscious riders at the other end of their pricing spectrum. And it's exciting to see Polygon potentially step into this space as well. But if all of those are just a bit too mundane for you, then check out this high-pivot trail bike made by carbon rim manufacturer True BC. The Nuth, I think is how you say it, is built around a slim carbon frame and dual-link high-pivot suspension layout delivering 135mm of travel. The man behind the design, Dominic, said that he opted for a smaller diameter tubing with a thicker carbon layup, which should, in theory, have the same tensile strength but be more resistant to impact-related damage. Personally, I think the slimmer tubes look sick. It's also built around the 8-pins integrated dropper post, which further enhances its clean and simple aesthetic. Another unique feature on the bike is the brake hose and derailleur routing, which instead of being guided into the tubing itself, goes through a separate cabled tunnel that runs under the top tube and on top of the chainstays. The frame, which weighs just 6 pounds or 2.7 kilograms with the shock and hardware, is expected to be available in limited quantities later on this year. Speaking of clean bikes, take a look at this all-new prototype, I guess, Canyon City Light commuter. The bike is designed to combine the practicality urban riders need with the looks of a modern road bike. Or at least, sort of. It almost looks like the back and front half of the bike were designed by 2 completely different teams. I'm not exactly sure what the kink top tube is all about. But hidden within that slightly bipolar silhouette are an integrated ABIS lock, integrated lights that are charged via a dynamo hub, and of course, full rack and fender compatibility. Another nice touch is the Gates belt drive with an internally geared hub, so no dirty pants on the way to work. There's no word yet on when the City Light will hit the market, but it definitely looks to be pretty production ready. Last week, we reported on a new 32-inch hardtail from 36er, but apparently the brand had even more to reveal at Eurobike, namely this 36-inch full suspension prototype. The bike features a beefy-looking aluminum frame and an unspecified amount of travel in the rear, though judging by the short shock stroke and tight rear tire clearance, it doesn't look to be too much. Things get a bit more business-oriented at the front of the bike though, where it's got a dual crown inverted fork and not 1, but 2 brakes slowing the front wheel down. Best yet, this pink behemoth is fully rideable, and Dirty Sixers 6'6" founder, David Fulch, plans to ride it at this year's Mega Avalanche. So that should cover the tallest of riders, but what about the Groms? Well, don't worry, because Giant and sister company Liv have all the kiddos covered as well. The Seek is available in one size and is designed for riders 4'3" to 4'11". But Giant's done a lot more than just shrink down the frame and use a smaller wheel size. Just about everything on the bike is designed specifically for pint-sized racers. This includes things like some narrow 320mm drop bars, a custom youth-specific saddle, and even reworked TRP ViStar levers. Another cool feature is the height-specific markings on the seat post, making it that much easier to keep bike fit dialed in as the rider grows. The Seek is available in 2 different builds with a base price of $1,800. So I think it's safe to say that it's not going to be for everybody, but it's still pretty cool to see more performance-oriented bikes available for the kiddos. While we're on the subject of fast bikes, we might as well talk about Factor's wild new Aero bike that was first seen at the Dauphiné a couple weeks ago. Sadly, despite having the bike on display at their booth, Factor is still staying pretty tight-lipped about their latest project. But thankfully, we still at least got to get a good look at it. To be honest, this thing is striking from every angle, from its steep seat tube angle, low slung seat stays, and monstrously wide head tube. But it's the cockpit and fork that really set it apart. The fork uses a bayonet design to keep the leading edge of the head tube as thin as possible. It also has a ridiculously wide stance, designed to better distribute air around the riders. Many folks were rightly wondering if these wide-set fork legs were going to be disqualified under UCI's new rule that bans anything wider than 115mm from the inside to inside of the fork leg. But Factor squeezed just under at 114mm. The cockpit, which is so cleanly integrated into the fork that I had to triple check that it wasn't all one molded piece, is almost as crazy as the fork. It has a distinctive Y shape and is once again flirting with UCI compliance, with a width of 300mm on the dot. There's no word yet on weight or specific geometry information, but I'd guess we're going to start seeing that roll out right around the Tour de France. And when we hear about it, we'll let you know right here on the Weekly Rewind, so you might as well subscribe. Speaking of race bikes, hiding in plain sight at the Pirelli booth was the new Flex Day prototype of the Trek Top Fuel we've seen every Richards racing on recently. There's currently a pretty big gap between the ultra-racy Trek Super Caliber and the much more trail-oriented Top Fuel. And as XCO races grow increasingly technical, many Trek athletes have been reaching to the Top Fuel rather than the brand's dedicated cross-country bike. This bike, though, seems to split the difference between those aforementioned models. It ditches Trek's signature ABP suspension design in favor of the lighter, more efficient Flex Day that we've been seeing grow increasingly popular on short travel bikes. Similar to the Factor, Trek isn't saying anything about this new bike, but we imagine it won't be staying that way for long. Last but not least, we have a pair of bikes from a brand that we're all super excited to have back again. That is, of course, Nukeproof. Up first is an updated version of the Reactor, which was actually designed before Nukeproof was sold by CRC last year. Changes to the frame include a few geo tweaks, UDH compatibility, and a new flip chip that will allow you to run it with either a 29 or a 27.5-inch rear wheel. The bike's going to be available in carbon and aluminum and is expected to be available later this fall. What's arguably even more exciting, though, is the prototype downhill bike they were showing off, which will be the first ground-up refresh under Nukeproof's new ownership. It uses the same front triangle from the previous generation Descent, but has an all-new rear end and linkage layout. Not only is the bike expected to be available to the public in the relatively near future, but Nukeproof also has plans to get back into World Cup downhill racing within the next season or two. And honestly, I can't think of a better way to end this episode of the Weekly Rewind. Thanks as always for tuning in, and until next time, remember that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.